हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम टू माय यूट्यूब चैनल द सोलफुल डायरी। आज के वीडियो में हम बात करेंगे टी.एस. एलियट की पोम द वेस्टलैंड के बारे में। पार्ट 1 में हम सेक्शन 1, 2 और 3 को डिस्कस कर चुके हैं। आज की वीडियो पार्ट 2 जिसमें हम सेक्शन 4 और 5 डिस्कस करेंगे। पार्ट 1 के वीडियो का लिंक डिस्क्रिप्शन में है और टी.एस. एलियट के बारे में और जानने के लिए भी वीडियो का लिंक डिस्क्रिप्शन में है। चलिए शुरू करते हैं आज की वीडियो। सेक्शन 4, डेथ बाय वाटर। Phillips the Phoenician, a fortnight dead, forgot the cry of gulls and the deep sea swell, and the prophet and loss. A current under sea picked his bones in whispers. As he rose and fell, he passed the stages of his age and yacht, entering the whirlpool. Gentile or Jew, oh, you turn, who turn the wheel and look to windward. Consider Phillips, who was once handsome and tall as you. Phillips the Phoenician. This character represented a drowned sailor, symbolizing the death of individual and the loss of identity in the modern world. Forgotten worries. In death, Phillips forgot the mundane concerns of life, like the cry of gulls and profit and loss, suggesting a release from worldly suffering. The whirlpool Phillips enters signifies the cycle of life and death, a recurring theme in the poem. The narrator urges the reader to consider Phillips, reminding them of their own mortality and the importance of living a meaningful life. While water typically symbolizes rebirth and purification, here it represents death and the spiritual emptiness of the modern world. Section 5, What the Thunder Said. Stanza 1. After the torchlight red on sweaty faces, after the frosty silence in the gardens, after the agony in stone places, the shouting and the crying, prison and palace and reverberation of thunder, of spring over distant mountains, he who was living is now dead. We who were living are now dying with a little patience. The opening lines depict a world drained of vitality, with imagery like torchlight red on sweaty faces, frosty silence in the gardens, and agony in stony places. This mirrors the spiritual and emotional emptiness prevalent in the modern world. The line, "He who was living is now dead, we who were living are now dying," reflect a sense of existential crisis and the inevitability of death. However, the following line, "with a little patience," suggests a glimmer of hope for renewal and regeneration. The mention of shouting and crying, prison and palace, and the reverberation of thunder conveys a sense of upheaval and change. This could represent the tumultuous state of society and the potential for transformation and thus the chaos. The thunder of spring over distant mountains symbolizes the arrival of hope and the possibility of redemption. The title, What the Thunder Said, draws from the Hindu Upanishads, where the thunder is interpreted as a divine voice offering guidance. The poem also alludes to the Fisher King myth, where a wounded king's infertility represents the bareness of the land. This section of the poem explores the themes of decay, death, and the potential for renewal. It conveys the despair and disillusionment of modern life while hinting at the possibility of redemption and spiritual rebirth. The thunder symbolizes a divine voice offering hope and guidance amidst the chaos. Stanza 2. Here is no water but only rock, rock and no water, and a sandy road. The road winding above among the mountains, which are mountains of rock without water. If there were water, we should stop and drink. Amongst the rock, one cannot stop or think. Sweat is dry and feet are in the sand. If there were only water amongst the rock, dead mountain mouth of carious teeth that cannot spit. Here one can neither stand nor lie nor sit. There is not even silence in the mountains, but dry sterile thunder without rain. There is not even solitude in the mountains, but red sullen faces near the sneer and snarl from doors of mud cracked houses if there were water. In this section, the poet is trying to convey a sense of desolation, aridity, and spiritual emptiness. The landscape described reflects the inner state of the speaker in modern society. Lack of water, the repeated emphasis on the absence of water symbolizes a lack of vitality, fertility, and spiritual nourishment. The imagery of rock and sand reinforces the theme of bareness and lack of growth. The speaker's inability to stand nor lie nor sit highlights a state of restlessness and discomfort, possibly a reflection of the anxieties of modern life. Dry, the dry, sterile thunder without rain signifies a futile and empty expression of power, devoid of life giving consequences. The red sullen faces sneer and snarl represent a hostile and unwelcoming environment, possibly reflecting the alienation and isolation experienced in modern society. The stanza of the poem paints a bleak picture of a world devoid of meaning and spiritual fulfillment. It serves as a powerful commentary on the disillusionment and fragmentation of society in the aftermath of World War One. Stanza 3. And no rock, if there were rock, and also water, and water, a spring, a pool among the rock. If there were the sound of water only, not the cicada and dry grass singing, but sound of water over a rock, where the hermit thrush sings in the pine trees. Drip, drip, drop, 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 drop. But there is no water. The poet reflects on the emptiness and isolation that can be found in both physical landscapes and within oneself. It explores themes of loneliness, despair, and the human condition in the face of a vast and indifferent universe. The speaker in this expert is imagining a desert landscape, longing for the presence of water, a symbol of life and vitality. The repetition of drip drop emphasizes the absence of water and reinforces the sense of desolation. The contrast between the imagined sounds of water and the reality of the dry desert landscape highlights the speaker's yearning for comfort and connection. Stanza 4. Who is the third who walks always beside you? When I count, there are only you and I together. But when I look ahead up the white road, there is always another one walking beside you, gliding wrapped in a brown mantle, hooded. I do not know whether a man or a woman, but who is that on the other side of you? Who is the third who walks always beside you? This line refers to a mysterious presence felt by the speaker. It's inspired by an account of an Antarctic expedition where explorers felt there was one more member than one could be counted. When I count there are only you and I together. The speaker acknowledges that there are only two people present. But when I look ahead up the white road, there is always another one walking beside you. This reinforces the sense of a third unseen presence accompanying them. Gliding wrapped in a brown mantle, hooded, I do not know whether a man or a woman. The speaker describes the mysterious figure, highlighting their anonymity and ambiguity. But who is that on the other side of you? The final question emphasizes the speaker's confusion and curiosity about the third presence. This relates to a phenomenon known as the third man factor, where people in extreme situations experience the presence of a comforting or guiding figure. It's often interpreted as a coping mechanism or a psychological response to stress. Stanza 5. What is that sound high in the air? Murmur of maternal lamentation. Who are those hooded hordes swarming over endless plains, stumbling in cracked earth, ringed by the flat horizon only? What is the city over the mountains? Cracks and reforms and bursts in the violet air. Falling towers, Jerusalem, Athens, Alexandria, Vienna, London, unreal. The lines depict a scene of desolation and impending doom. The hooded hordes swarming and cracked earth suggest a post-apocalyptic landscape, possibly referencing the aftermath of World War One. The mention of cities like Jerusalem, Athens, Alexandria, Vienna, and London, followed by the word unreal, highlights the collapse of civilization and the loss of cultural and historical significance. The murmur of maternal lamentation could symbolize the grief and despair of a mother figure witnessing the destruction and suffering. The poem as a whole explores themes of spiritual emptiness and the search for meaning in a fragmented world. This passage reflects the sense of disillusionment and disintegration of traditional values. The falling towers and the city, cracking and reforming, contribute to the apocalyptic imagery, suggesting a world in chaos and upheaval. Stanza 6. A woman drew her long black hair out tight and fiddled whisper music on those strings. And bats with baby faces in the violet light whistled and beat their wings, and crawled head downward, down in blackened wall, and upside down in air were towers, tolling reminiscent bells that kept the hours, and voices singing out of empty cisterns and exhausted wells. The woman with long black hair could represent a powerful, mysterious figure, perhaps a witch or a siren. The act of drawing her hair out tight and making music with it suggests a kind of supernatural power or enchantment. The bats with baby faces are a striking image combining the innocence of baby's face with the traditionally sinister associations of bats. This could represent a duality of good and evil or the hidden dangers lurking beneath a seemingly innocent exterior. The towers and bells suggest a connection to traditional religious imagery, but their inversion in the air creates a sense of disorientation and unease. The bells tolling reminiscent hint at a haunting past of warning of impending doom. The voices singing from empty cisterns and exhausted wells symbolize a sense of lost despair or the echoes of past experiences. This stanza creates a dreamlike surreal atmosphere filled with strange and unsettling imagery. It hints at the presence of supernatural forces, the power of feminine allure, and a deeper underlying message about the human condition. Stanza 7. In this decayed hole among the mountains, in the faint moonlight, the grass is singing. Over the tumbled graves, about the chapel, there is the empty chapel, only the wind's home. It has no windows and the door swings. Dry bones can harm no one. Only a cock stood on the roof tree. Coco Rico, in a flash of lightning, then a damp gust, bringing rain. The poem portrays a barren and lifeless landscape symbolized by the decayed hole among the mountains and tumbled graves. It reflects the spiritual and cultural emptiness of the modern world. The empty chapel with a swinging door represents the absence of religious meaning and the decline of traditional belief systems. The wind, as the sole inhabitant of the chapel, underscores the theme of loneliness and disconnection. Despite the bleak imagery, the poem hints at the possibility of renewal through the image of the rock crowing, which can be interpreted as a symbol of resurrection and hope. The poem's fragmented structure and use of multiple voices and language reflects the fragmented nature of modern life and consciousness. Stanza 8. Ganga was sunken, and the limp leaves waited for rain, while the black clouds gathered for distant over Himavant. The jungle crouched, hummed in silence, then spoke the thunder. Datta, what have we given? My friend, blood shaking my heart, the awful daring of a moment's surrender, which an age of prudence can never retract. By this and this only we have existed, which is not to be found in our obituaries or in memories draped by the beneficent spider or under seals broken by the lean solicitor. In our empty rooms, the drum, I have heard the key turn in the door once and turn once only. We think of the key, each in his prison. Thinking of the key, each confirms a prison. Only at nightfall, ethereal rumors revive for a moment. A broken Coriolanus. The Damyata. The boat responded gaily to the hand expert with sail and oar. The sea was calm. Your heart would have responded gaily when invited, beating obedient to controlling hands. Ganga was sunken. This refers to the Ganga River, a holy river in Hinduism, being dried up, symbolizing spiritual barrenness. Then spoke the thunder Da. The thunder speak the word Da, which is further elaborated as Datta Dayadhvam Damyata. Datta, what have we given? This line asks what we have truly given or contributed to the world. My friend, blood shaking my heart. This expresses the speaker's emotional turmoil and intensity of their experience. The awful daring of a moment surrender. This refers to the transformative power of moments of surrender or letting go, which is not to be found in our obituaries. This emphasizes that true meaning in life is not found in external achievements or societal recognition. In our empty rooms, this signifies the emptiness and lack of fulfillment in modern life. The three words spoken by the thunder, Datta, Dayadhvam, Damyata, are Sanskrit words meaning give, sympathize, and control, respectively. They represent the three essential qualities for achieving spiritual renewal and overcoming the emptiness depicted in the poem. In this stanza, the landscape transforms from the European wasteland to the lush jungles of India and the holy river Ganga. Empty faith is once more symbolized explicitly by the empty chapel. This can also reference to the chapel perilous, the graveyard for those who have sought the Holy Grail and failed. Stanza 9. I sat upon the shore, fishing, with the arid plain behind me. Shall I at least set my lance in order? London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. Pois ascos nel foco ci gli affina, quando fiam uti celidan, O swallow, swallow, le prince de Aquitaine, alla tor aboli. These fragments I have shored against my ruins. Why then I'll fit you. Harnomos mad again. Datta Dayatvam Damyata. Shantihi, Shantihi, Shantihi. The last stanza is a mix of phrases from various sources, including the Bible, Dante's Inferno, and Shakespeare's Hamlet, reflecting the poem's theme of fragmentation and cultural decay. I sat upon the shore fishing with the arid plain behind me. This evokes a sense of desolation and the speaker's search for meaning in a barren landscape. Shall I at least set my lands in order? The speaker contemplates whether they can bring order to their own life amidst the chaos. London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. This nursery rhyme represents the collapse of civilization and tradition. Pollicer Asco's nel Fococi Gle Athena, from Dante's Inferno, drifting to the purification of souls in fire. Quanto fiam uti celadon, Latin for when shall I be like the swallow, expressing a longing for renewal and escape. Le Prince de Aquitaine a la Tour Abol, a reference to the ruined tower of a French prince symbolizing lost glory. These fragments I have showed against my ruins. The speaker acknowledges the fragmented nature of their world and their attempt to create meaning from the pieces. Videnly Fitu Harnomo Mad Again, from Shakespeare's The Spanish Tragedy, representing the descent into madness. Datta Dayadvam Damyata, Sanskrit words meaning give, sympathize, control, offering a path towards redemption. Shanti, 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 the Hindu peace mantra, concluding the poem with a note of hope and tranquility. Poetic devices. Allusion. An allusion is a passing reference to a literary historical uh, place or event, usually made without explicit identification. The Wasteland is famous for the frequency of its allusions. Indeed, the poem is something of a patchwork made up of sprawling diversity of references to Greco Roman mythology, medieval legend, work of anthropology, nursery rhymes, and dance hall tunes. Most prominent of all are the poem's allusions to sacred texts, example the Christian Bible, the Buddhist fire sermon, and the Hindu Upanishad, as well as literary classics from numerous European language traditions, example German, French, and Italian. Eliot indicated the source for many of his allusions in a series of notes he prepared for the poem's publication in book form. In the century since its publication, scholars have exhaustively analyzed these references and tracked down others that Eliot neglected to mention in his notes. The Burial of the Dead refers to Hofgarten in Munich, but most of the time Eliot's allusions have a more complex function. As an example, consider the opening A Game of Chess, lines 77 to 80. The chair she sat in, like a burnished throne, glowed on the marble where the glass held up by standards wrought with fruited vines, from which a golden cupidon peeped out. These lines echo a similar passage in Shakespeare's play Antony and Cleopatra that describes Cleopatra's appearance as she floats on a barge down a river. There's a reference to candles that flung the smoke into the languera. The unusual word laquera is a Latin term for a panel ceiling, much like the ceiling of a gilded hall, where Dido, the queen of Carthage, received Aeneas in Virgil's Aeneid. Blazing torches hang down from the gilded ceiling and vanquish the night with their flames. This illusion introduces new layers of complexity to the scene. The allusion to the ceiling panel in Dido's hall creates an oblique link between the unnamed wealthy woman and Dido. Re- Those who have read Aeneid will know that, in a fit of passion after being abandoned by Aeneas, Dido stabs herself. Eliot's wealthy woman is thus linked to two tragic queens, both of whom were entangled in complex and frustrating form of love. And as we readers soon find out, the unnamed wealthy woman is similarly frustrated. She sits waiting for her lover to come. When he finally arrives and she expresses desire for his companionship, he can't think anything but death. The example of a wealthy woman in a game of chess demonstrates two key points to keep in mind when considering Eliot's use of illusion. First, Eliot often uses multiple illusions to build referential complexity. As such, it isn't enough just to look up individual references. It's also important to consider how illusions relate to each other. Second, in order to understand the relevance of a given illusion, it's crucial to investigate the larger context from which the reference is taken. In the example above, the single word Laquaria directs us to a scene in the Aeneid, but it isn't the scene that is directly relevant. Rather, it's the broader context of Dido's relationship to Aeneas as well as her tragic end that matters. Irony. Irony plays a crucial role throughout the Wasteland, and it shows up in different ways. One way Eliot features irony in the poem is through verbal irony, which is a rhetorical figure where a speaker means something different than what they say. As an example, consider the section of Fire Sermon, where Tiresias recounts the sexual liaison between the typist and her lover. Where the young man arrives, Tiresias describes him as follows. He, the young man, Carn Carbuncular arrives, a small house agent's clerk, with one bold stare, one of the low on whom assurance sits, as a silk hat on a Bradford millionaire. Though Tiresias mentions the young man's splotchy red appearance, the overall description may initially appear flattering. The man is gainfully employed and has a bold character that seems to inspire confidence, just as a silk hat on Bradford millionaire might do. However, the simile that likens the young man's reliability to the silk hat is deeply ironic. The key to understanding this irony is the concluding reference to a Bradford millionaire. Bradford is a town in northeast England that has long been associated with textile production. During World War One, the mills there prospered greatly due to the production of textiles for many uniforms and blankets. After the war, however, the mill owners were charged with profiteering. A Bradford millionaire is therefore one on whom assurance sits rather poorly. Yet, Madame Sosostris' predictive ability comes under suspicion when she gets to the cart with the one eyed merchant. At this point, she notes that there is something he carries on his back, which I am forbidden to see. It's ironic that someone so famously clear sighted lacks crucial insight into this card. Adding further to the irony of this moment is the fact that the one eyed merchant reappears later in the poem in the form of Mr. Eugenitz, the Smyrna merchant. Despite having a Greek name that means high-born or noble, this disheveled and unshaven man lives as an exile in London, presumably after fleeing from the violence that had beset Smyrna in Eliot's time. Thus, not only is the nobility of his birth in question, but he also goes on to proposition the speaker for an unwanted homosexual trias. These are the aspects of the one eyed merchant that Madame Sosostris ironically failed to see. Juxtaposition. A defining characteristic of Eliot's poem is its juxtaposition to present a vision of modern life as fragmented and disoriented. Juxtaposition has two primary functions in the wasteland. First, in his composition of the poem, Eliot relied heavily on the juxtaposition of various quotations and allusions, often given in fragmented forms. What results is a collage like assemblage that often has a destabilizing effect. The poem's famous final stanza offers the most condensed example. London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. Poets ascos nel foco ci gli affina, quando fiam uti celadon, o swallow, swallow. Le prince te aquitaine alla tour aboli. These lines juxtapose fragmentary quotations from popular and literary sources in different languages, resulting in a polyglot collage that most readers will find confusing, but that confusion is part of the desired effect. The speaker acknowledges when immediately afterward they declare, "These fragments I have showed against my ruins." In addition to using juxtaposition as a compositional technique for assembling smaller fragments into a larger work, Eliot also uses juxtaposition as a strategy for organizing each of the poem's five sections. As an example, consider the Burial of Dead, which opens the poem. This section consists of four distinct vignettes, each spoken by a different speaker with nothing but a line break between to designate the changes of setting and voice. A similar break occurs in a game of chess. About halfway through the section, there's a sudden shift from the third person speaker who narrates the interaction between the wealthy woman and her lover. Suddenly and seemingly out of nowhere, a new speaker takes over, this time using a first person perspective. When Lil's husband got demobbed, I said, I didn't mince my words. I said to her myself, hurry up, please, it's time. Now Albert's coming back. Make yourself a bit smart. Similar breaks and shifts occur throughout the rest of the poem, juxtaposing one vignette with another. The result is dazzling if disorienting kaleidoscope of places and perspective. Repetition. Repetition is among the most notable hallmarks of the wasteland. It comes in variety of forms and has a range of different effects. Perhaps the most important type of repetition in the poem is refrain, which refers to any words, phrase, or line that gets repeated over the course of a poem. The most obvious refrain is the in the wasteland appears in the second half of a game of chess. There the story told when an unnamed working class woman gets repeatedly interrupted by a bartender announcing that it's time to close. Hurry up, please. It's time. Not only does the bartender's call break the woman's story up into fragments, and its increasing frequency also evokes the existential urgency of time running out. Another significant refrain is the phrase unreal city, which appears twice in each case as a single line. Line 376 echoes this refrain but reduces it to a single word, unreal, contrasting with the repeated image of an ominously spectral city is the refrain at the beginning of the fire sermon, where the speaker refers to the sweet Thames three times in lines 176, 183, and 184. Other examples of repetition appear at various points throughout the poem. At their most extreme, these instances of repetition have an effect that communicates obsession and disorientation. For example, consider the exchange between the wealthy woman and her reluctant lover. In a game of chess, the woman is anxious and lonely and longs for companionship, but her lover, who has just come home, refuses to communicate. His silence pushes her to an outburst of frustrated obsession. My nerves are bad tonight. Yes, bad. Stay with me. Speak to me. Why do you never speak? Speak. What are you thinking of? What thinking what? I never know what you are thinking. Think. The woman's obsessive repetition of the words what speak and then reflects her uncomprehending frustration, which leaves her isolated in the face of his silence. Nothing again, nothing. Another significant example of repetition appears in the poem's final section, What the Thunder Said. There, the speaker meditates on the dry sterility of the land. Here is no winter but only rock, rock and no water, and the sandy road. The road winding up among the mountains, which are mountains of rock and without water. If there were water, we should stop and drink. Amongst the rock, one cannot stop or think. The various repetition of the word water, rock, road, mountains, and stop draw the reader into an almost maddening experience of disorientation. Themes: the bareness of modern life. The Wasteland offers a profound reflection on the bareness of modern life. In Eliot's imagining, World War One had irreparably damaged Western civilization, reducing it to a smoking ruin. This damage shattered the cultural and aesthetic inheritance of the Western tradition and effectively halted social and economic development. The result was a metaphorical bareness that affected all levels of life and culture. Eliot represents this bareness most centrally through the well known figure of the Fisher King. According to Arthurian legend, the Fisher King comes last in a long line of British kings charged with the responsibility of guarding the Holy Grail. As Britain's protector, he is also the symbolic embodiment of its land. However, the Fisher King was sustained a sexual wound that makes him impotent and renders his entire kingdom barren. In Eliot's hands, he becomes the poster child for modernity's impotence. The appearance of Tyreus in the fire ceremony also references barrenness, albeit more obliquely. Tyreus plays a significant role in Sophocles' play Oedipus Rex, in which a curse falls upon the city of Thebes, rendering both land and people infertile. Tyreus' gift of insight enables him to realize the curse is the result of Oedipus having killed his father and slept with his mother. Eliot also reflects this theme of barrenness by referring to instances of sexuality that are either violent or joyless, and hence always non reproductive. In a game of chess, for instance, the anonymous wealthy lady is implicitly linked to Philomela, a woman from Greek myth who suffers a violent rape by her sister's husband. The wealthy woman doesn't suffer such a brutal fate. However, she does suffer the pain of longing for sexual companionship, only to be met with her lover's morose silence. Another key scene of sexual frustration comes in the fire ceremony, where Tiresias recounts the trials between the typist and her lover. Their encounter is excruciatingly joyless, and Eliot's language transposes the sexual violence of Philomela into a more modern key. Flushed and decided, he resolves at once. Exploring hands encounter no defense. His vanity requires no response and makes a welcome of indifference. Other references to joyless or unwanted sex appear in the same section, as when Queen Elizabeth recounts having awkward sex with Leicester on boat, and when Mr. Huguenot propositions the speaker for a homosexual getaway. Finally, Eliot references the barrenness of modern life more abstractly in the poem's various descriptions of desiccated and infertile land. The failure of language to communicate properly in a world shattered by political violence, institutional collapse, and ideological instability, language loses its capacity to communicate as it once did. Eliot reflects on the failure of language to communicate properly in several ways. Perhaps the most straightforward example occurs in a game of chess when the anonymous wealthy woman pleads with her lover to tell her what he is thinking. My nerves are bad tonight. Yes, bad. Stay with me. Speak to me. Why do you never speak? Speak. What are you thinking of? What thinking? What? I never know what you are thinking. Think. He meets her players with silence, remaining imprisoned in thoughts of death he can't communicate. I think we are in Rat's Alley, where the dead men lost their bones. The lovers' silent dialogue continues for another 12 lines, where they communicate nothing and again nothing. In addition to this general failure to communicate, Eliot signals the challenge of language in several other ways. For example, he dramatizes how radically different registers of language often conflict with one another, in contrast to the refined iambic pentameter used to describe the wealthy woman's ornamented home. The second half of a game of chess makes a disorienting shift to the speech of a working class woman. He cadences strain iambic rhythm in a way made yet more jarring by the constant interruptions of the bartender's all caps call. Hurry up, please, it's time. Another type of register shift occurs in the perverse sexualization of language. This occurs when Tiresias uses a phallic simile to describe a taxi throbbing waiting, or when dirty ears hear the phrase jug jug not as the sound a nightingale makes but as a slang for sex. Finally, language also fails to communicate properly because it has become too multiple. Readers will likely feel this instinctively through the way the poem itself has an overwhelming abundance of meaning. This abundance results in part from Eliot's use of hundreds of references and quotations from a plurality of literary, historical, and religious contexts. The poem's multiplicity also results from the way it speaks in different languages. For one thing, the poem features numerous speakers, though because the distinctions between them aren't always clear, it's not always obvious who's communicating what to whom. For another thing, the poem literally communicates in a range of different languages, including English, Latin, Greek, French, German, Italian, and Sanskrit. Eliot's fragmentation of language powerfully recalls the biblical story of the Tower of Babel. According to this story, humans were once united as a single race with a single language. Enabled by their unity, they decided to build a tower that would reach the heavens. But God, who saw their construction as an act of hubris, topped the tower, scattered the people, and cursed them all to speak different languages. After Babel, people were divided because they no longer spoke each other's language. The irreversibility of decline. Eliot's vision in the Wasteland reflects a world in irreversible decline. References to death and dying are frequent in the poem, starting with the title of the first section, The Burial of the Dead, which relates to the burial rites of the Anglican Church. The poem also features numerous images of bones, and the fourth section, Death by Water, focuses on a drowned sailor. There are also many oblique allusions to death, dying, and even suicide. For instance, Iliad features many allusions to Dante's epic poem about the Christian afterlife. Additionally, the anonymous wealthy woman in a game of chess is implicitly linked both to Cleopatra and Dido, two queens who took their own lives. If such images and illusions weren't enough to communicate an overwhelming sense of pessimism, the poem is saturated with the language of descent. Referencing a sledding trip, one speaker can say simply, and down we went. Later, another speaker describes how bats crawled or head downward down a blackened wall. Even birdsong implies decline. Where the hermit thrush sings in the pine trees, drip, drop, 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 drop. But there is no water. The whole world, it would seem, it's dropping, dropping, dropping. Eliot also emphasizes the theme of decline through the apocalyptic tone communicated through the poem's many references to biblical language. Yet Eliot doesn't just cite biblical tradition, he also revises that tradition. For instance, whereas the New Testament recounts the resurrection of Christ and predicts his second coming, the Wasteland implicitly questions the prophecy of salvation. What the thunder said opens with a passage that recalls the crucifixion, but which seems to insist that Christ is dead and never to be resurrected. After the torchlight red on sweaty faces, after the frosty silence in the gardens, after the agony in stony places, the shouting and crying, prison and palace, and reverberation of thunder, of spring over distant mountains, he who was living is now dead. Unable to envision the future salvation described in the Bible, the speaker of the poem's final section chooses resignation. Shall I at least set my lands in order? They further reflect this resignation by turning to the Hindu Upanishads, which emphasize the cultivation of personal responsibility rather than salvation. As the poem's closing lines suggest, it is through the principle of generosity, datta, compassion, dayatvam, and self control, damyata, they, that we may arrive in the future at some form of inner peace, shanti. Datta, dayatvam, damyata, shanti, shanti, shanti. At the end, there isn't hope, only resignation in the face of decline. The torment and comfort of memory. The work of memory is central to the wasteland, and it involves equal measures of torment and comfort. Eliot indicates as much in the poem's opening lines, where April mixes memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. Here, the speaker sets up an opposition between memory and desire. Memory is associated with the past and desire with the future. Yet, memory and desire are further linked respectively with dull roots and spring rain compared to the reanimating power of the coming spring rain. The dull roots of the past seem dead and depressing. In this way, desire is preferable to memory. However, the speaker began by insisting that April is the cruelest month. If April is cruel, it's because it encourages hope for a future that won't come. Indeed, as the poem's images of desiccated land suggest, the spring rain won't arrive. And if rain does arrive, as it will in what the thunder said, it will come as an overwhelming deluge. In short, the future marked out by desire is fraught and can't be satisfied. The only recourse is to return to the past and to work of the memory. For a poet like Eliot, the work of memory inevitably relates to literary and cultural tradition. Here too, memory is both a torment and comfort. For many, the First World War threw the authority of cultural and political institutions into question, effectively shattering the traditions that had previously felt so sustaining. It was no longer possible to resort to the naive Victorian idea that Greco Roman civilization was a font of sweetness and light, as Matthew Arnold once put it. Yet, even after being shattered into fragments, the Western tradition continues to offer some kind of sustenance. Eliot implies as much in his reliance on allusions and quotations from this tradition, which he quietly celebrates at the poem's end. London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. Pues ascos nel foco cli affina, quando flam uti celadon, o swallow, swallow. Le prince de acquente alla tour aboli. These fragments I have shored against my ruins where they will fit you. Drawing together bits from English nursery rhymes as well as Italian, Latin, and French poetry, the speaker at once acknowledges their fragmentary nature and pledges to fit them. Notably, the word fit has three key meanings here: to put in place, an uncontrollable outbreak, as in a fit of madness, and a section of a poem. However maddening it may be, the fragments from the Western tradition can still be collaged in such a way as to make a new form of art. थैंक यू। आई होप आज की वीडियो आपको पसंद आई होगी। अगर अच्छी लगी तो लाइक शेयर एंड सब्सक्राइब टू माई चैनल, और हमें कमेंट करके बताइए कि आप नेक्स्ट वीडियो किस टॉपिक पर देखना चाहते हैं। मिलते हैं कल एक और इन्फॉर्मेटिव वीडियो के साथ शाम 4 बजे।